Hey everyone, I want you to take a second, think long and hard with me. Is there a time you have had to go through a big change? What did that feel like? And as it was happening, what were you thinking about? And when it was over, did you feel this sense of overwhelming relief? Well, sometimes that's how change tends to happen. And we're going to talk about changes and our changes in our life and how these things impact everyday people just like you and I. So stay tuned for a very interesting discussion on change here on the Go Think About It podcast. Welcome, everyone, to the Go Think About It podcast, previously the Curiosity Matters podcast. And this is officially episode 1, right, of the Go Think About It podcast. So welcome to the Go Think About It podcast, where we talk about all the many, many, many things that are to be thought so deeply on, right?
Yes, all of the things that we think about, and we would love for you all to go ahead and join us, send us some questions, all those good things.
Yes, email, like and subscribe, by the way, on Facebook, Go Think About It Pod, Instagram, same thing, Go Think About It Podcast, and we also do have an email coming up shortly. But other than that, we'll have more correspondence opportunities in the future. Sorry, we're still under construction. Yes.
I mean, look, y'all get to witness us go from the way from the bottom to the top. Okay, so you get to witness that at the beginning. You got to get things together. That's where the subject of change comes in. When you're analyzing how your thing is going,
Exactly.
and you realize, you know what, this may work better a different way. Don't be afraid to change.
Exactly. Episode on change. And changes happen, big changes. So we're done explaining ourselves, right? But that is what we're going to talk about. And we have big, exciting changes going on in our life currently that we're very excited about and that we're going to share. But we're also just going to talk about change in the context of impact and good changes, bad changes, and how these different things impact us, especially in a over time. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of how things tend to happen sometimes for us. It's like a seed is planted. You know what I mean? And sometimes a seed is planted in the mind, and it takes years, and over time of
Well, I mean, change is the only thing that's constant in life. So to me, I see change as something to be embraced instead of feared. And so when you talk about a seed being planted and it taking time to come to fruition, that's long-term change. But at the same time, there are so many short-term changes that are constantly happening.
Yes, and here's one of the big scary things about changes is you don't necessarily know what's going to come out on the other end. But there's different types of changes as well, I feel like. There's internal changes that seem to me to be a lot more difficult for us to tackle as people, maybe, depending on the person. And external changes that I think are things that maybe we precipitate as people, you know what I mean, or the things that we do that kind of create reverberations around us. You know what I mean? And to me, at least, I find those type of changes a lot easier to digest. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Interesting. I feel like the internal changes are easier for me because it's the only thing that I have full control over. So, like, that's what it's easier for me to digest an internal change because I know that that really just takes self-reflection and work on myself and awareness, whereas an external change, sometimes I may not always understand the driving factors, or a lot of times with external changes I don't understand like what was the end goal, what was the purpose of this external change, whereas for internal changes I usually understand the why and the how. So I think for me it comes down to understanding, and used to be that used to cause friction for me with change, no matter what kind of change it was. If I didn't understand the driving force, I didn't like it and I rebelled against it, whether it was something at work or something with my family or even just personally.
Yeah. So, excuse me. My question is, why is it sometimes so hard, or does it seem like we're going through such a hard time? You know what I mean? Sometimes. And this is what occurred to me as you were also talking, is I start to wonder, is it just me? You know what I mean? Is it just because of my past and my upbringing and the trauma that I've experienced?
I don't think so. I think we all have some difficulty with change. I mean, in no matter what walk of life you come from, change is difficult for us to deal with because, I mean, we get used to things being a certain way, and you have to learn to embrace change. It's not something that is innate to us, at least in my experience, in my observations, because I mean, look at these people, these that are uber rich. If they were okay with embracing change, they wouldn't be afraid of paying taxes, because it's not like it's going to affect their day-to-day life. It's just the change.
Right. And yeah, so obviously we get comfortable being a certain way or being in a certain set of circumstances. I mean, it's very interesting because looking and drawing from my own personal experience, there came a point in time where I decided that, I mean, I want to make changes. You know what I mean? It's not that things were bad. You know what I mean? It's just that maybe I felt, am I fulfilling my purpose? I kind of felt like I was still on my way to trying to achieve who I really want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then the changes start happening, you know what I mean? But I don't know, it's the stress feeling and anxiety feeling that starts to occur. You know what I mean? And it's a part of it is because of the things that are happening that are out of my control.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what it is. It's like, the changes that are in my control,
mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I guess that actually relates right back to what you were saying,
mm-hmm.
because but it's strange how you related it, you know what I mean? Because, like, for example, for somebody trying to quit smoking,
mm-hmm.
Quitting smoking is can be very, very, very difficult. But that's obviously something that's totally within our control, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, change, to me, the thing that I don't like about it is the uncertainty on the other side of the change. Like, even if right now, and I know this is bad, but even if right now is uncomfortable, on the other side of that change, I don't know if it's more comfortability or more uncomfortability. So it's like, well, maybe I should just stay where I'm at. But what I've learned is if I embrace the change, then I understand that whatever's on the other side of that, whether I like it or dislike it, I can just choose to change again.
Yeah. And yeah, obviously, I think there is something to be said of really recognizing and acknowledging all of the elements because there are external factors, right, that take place. And that's one of the things that sometimes I feel creates a challenge within, for me, is as I'm trying to make changes or I'm trying to do whatever I'm trying to do. You know what I mean? Hell, anytime you're trying to do anything that you're not currently doing, that constitutes some kind of a change, right?
Yeah, right.
On at least a micro scale. But when the resistance happens, you know what I mean, is where I feel like all kinds of things occur. Sometimes, you know, and there can always be too much of a good thing, right? Sometimes we just use this staunch determination and perseverance to power through these things until, you know, the what they call that, the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. You know what I mean? It's bound to happen.
I mean, in terms of change, though, it's you can't stop change. So like you said, the only thing that you could do is choose to either embrace it or resist it. And if you're going to resist something that is going to happen regardless, I mean, that's not going to go well most of the time, because you're going against the natural order, which is change.
So maybe we have to, in some ways, resist. You know, and maybe that is our way of essentially placing, you know, our reality up to simple inquiry, you know,
Honestly,
if you will.
I think resistance is done out of ego. It is done out of the human ego, thinking that we can truly affect the things that we cannot. Like, resisting change, like, we don't, to me, there's a pattern of resistance where it's humans resist the things that are changing that we honestly have no control over, but we're constantly trying to resist it, like aging. People go through all types of procedures to try to resist a change that is inevitable.
Right.
And then they end up harming their bodies, putting their bodies through even more stress, and which in turn ages themselves faster. Right. Instead of just accepting and embracing that we all are going to age, it is a change that is going to happen, and just enjoying life. Then you reduce stress, you reduce the aging process, and it's just, it's a choice that if you go against it, that's why I don't know if I necessarily agree with you when you said maybe we have to resist. I don't think we have to resist, maybe out of ego, but once you get past your ego, then really, why would you resist?
There is a part of me that wonders, because I question whether everything, you know, that you see around you in terms of man-made is a result of men resisting, you know what I mean, against the natural forces, you know, or
okay.
sometimes, you know, and sometimes we work obviously in concert with nature, you know, but in a large part, a lot of our existence currently in this civilization is kind of built on the resistance of nature.
I see what you mean, but do you see the results of that resistance?
Well, there are some positive and some negative. Right?
Well, see, the thing that I wanted to get to is that there have been a lot of architects in other countries that are moving towards designs that work in tandem with nature rather than resisting it. rather than using up so much energy to go against the natural order of the environment that's outside or that's natural to the place.
Right.
They are creating architecture that works with the nature. So if it's hot, they're creating architecture where it naturally cools the building, so it doesn't take so much external energy to cool the building. And so it is a choice whether we can exist in the environment naturally in tandem or resisting it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That is I guess that is the new deal, you know what I mean? And that's kind of, I think, where we as humans seem to be kind of coming around to currently, is this idea of kind of working more in tandem with nature, even though sometimes I wonder if it might be a little too late.
I mean, honestly, we used to work. I don't know, because I wasn't here. I just got here, not that long ago. But it seems to me, when you study history, that human civilizations used to work in tandem with nature until the Industrial Revolution. And then it was like, well, there started to be this evidence that we could exist in other ways that did not necessarily have to go with the natural order. Then we started using all these plastics where we're completely aware that this is not of the natural order. And now we're dealing with the consequences of over 60 some years of high plastics consumption.
Well, I do feel like in some ways one could see the progression, because it all really starts with the necessity for resistance, so obviously the the land has to be tilled, or what do you call it, the land has to be aerated, worked, you know what I mean, in order to produce food, you know what I mean, and that's the resistance.
But see, the thing is, that land can be worked, but plastics and the things that are harmful for the environment are not from the land being worked. It's byproducts of things that are being refined from the land. Like these are human-made things that are not necessarily to resist nature, but to just, like, out of ego, trying to say, well, I can create something better than what naturally exists.
Yeah, and so ultimately the new norm, or the new elitist attitude, right, is going to have to be one of extreme, what do you call it, like stoic, like, you know what I mean?
Stoicism?
Because if you think about it, well, I don't know if that's the right term, but if you think about it, like, the previous generations were defined by the excesses, right? You know what I mean? And
so minimalism?
Minimalism. Yeah.
I mean,
so
I really think I don't know
have
if
to start with these mega rich, you know what I mean? They have to start giving up on some of these mega rich lifestyles, you know what I mean?
See, what's going to spark that change? Because it's not, I doubt that the majority of them are going to willingly embrace that change. Because if they were, they would have done it already.
Well, these people are considered the leaders of the free world, So the leaders lead, right? And everybody else follows. I mean, if resources are getting more scarce, then it's the leaders of the free world that have to start demonstrating the capacity to live those type of lifestyles, more free of the excesses.
Well, some of them are, like the guy who, his family who owned Patagonia, and like the initiative that they started by giving away their company and things like that. Some people are living their mission, but the majority of people that have a lot of money in this world are not concerned with that. The Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk's of the world, that's not their concern.
Yeah, and obviously these are the type of changes that need to be thought about, because these guys are convinced that they're going to find another source of energy or another planet and they're going to set up shop there.
And so that's the type of change they're willing to make. So they are willing to make a change, but it's not a change that's going to benefit everyone. And that's the attitude that got us in this situation in the first place. And so, I mean, honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, I encourage you to really think about the changes in your life that you have control over, and think about how you could possibly make your own life better, but also the people around you. Because a lot of us have more control than we realize over the environment that we live in and the community that we live in.
Right. And it really starts with just what we do, I guess. And listen, it can be rough out here. It can be really, really rough trying to figure out how to find a place in this world. Especially for people who don't have guidance. And that's really, I guess, what we're mainly talking about is.
Well, yeah, we'll go ahead and go into more detail in our next segment about some of the changes that we're making and some things that we are moving forward with when it comes to giving a little bit more guidance.
So, back to our conversation on changes. And, wow, I mean, as we stated earlier, we have really made some big changes in our life in terms of purchasing a home, and now also doing some renovations, looking at really making the home ours and personalizing and getting ready to settle in.
Yeah, we've had a lot of big changes lately. I mean, we already announced this, but we've gotten married. We're still navigating what that means and the changes there. We just bought a home and we're renovating, and babe just painted the master bedroom. It looks amazing, but so many other changes to navigate. And then we've, got to get ready to move, and that's another change. Thinking about redecorating and new furniture, and it's a lot of change all at once. And so, like we were mentioning in the previous segment, it can feel like you kind of want to resist it, and it can feel overwhelming sometimes. But yeah.
Well, of course, there are certain changes I think that, we do want to resist. And, well, that is really, I think, let me examine that for a second, because I'm getting a picture in my head of how that goes. And the way that it goes is you get an idea in your head. You have a dream or you have a goal, right? You want to do X. And so you go about trying to figure out how to get there, you know what I mean, or get that. But what ends up happening is, for some people, I think, is the actual challenge of getting that goal, attaining that goal, is not what you expected.
Yeah, going through the change of getting to the goal is like, oh, wow, this is making me feel anxious. Oh, my God, I feel overwhelmed. It's like the change that I wanted, the goal that I wanted to achieve is here. Like, for instance, buying the house. We bought the house, exciting, so excited. But now we're like, okay, let's paint it. Let's do a couple of renovations to make it ours. And to make it a little bit easier on our pocketbook, we're going to do some of those, like painting.
Right.
But we found out yesterday that entails a little bit more work than we anticipated, a little bit more supplies than we actually purchased and we're prepared for. And so it started to feel a little bit overwhelming. But it doesn't change the fact that it is something that we still want to do.
Right. So now these new challenges are things that you don't want to do or you never even thought of because now you're like, well, like you said, it's more expensive than I imagined. Or maybe you don't even, that option is not available. You know, maybe you wanted the laminate flooring or you wanted the wood flooring, right?
Yeah.
But they don't have that and they got bamboo and tile. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, but you still want, obviously, to have your floor finished. And so that's the thing about changes to me, about navigating changes. What's worked more effectively for me recently is really just staying focused on, okay, what do I really want here ultimately? Big picture style.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's like now you gotta do something that you didn't expect that you would have to do, you know, in order to achieve that goal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so one thing that just came to mind is our conversation with my younger brother. And he was wanting to discuss with me and us a change that he was thinking about making in his life. But he was being short-sighted in his thought process in thinking about the change. So just to clue you all in, he just recently moved to a new apartment and his car was stolen. And he woke up that morning and realized that someone had tried to steal it again. And so he was thinking about moving and breaking his lease, and he wanted to talk through it with us. And so my initial thought was, okay, well, let's talk about how much this is going to cost, because I'm very pragmatic when it comes to cost, when it comes to making those impulsive decisions. So I told him to pull out his lease, and we started walking through that. But when you came into the room, you started walking him through, okay, well, actually, let's back up and think about the big picture here. And I think that was great, especially because as a younger person, he can get lost in the details. And even though as an older person, the details help me make a decision, I think that big picture perspective is really great for younger folks to think of, because I know you're thinking about the details already, but maybe think about the big picture goal when you're thinking about making that change. So in his instance, we asked him, okay, so is your long-term goal comfortability, or is it building wealth? Because if it's building wealth, you're going to spend no less than $5,000 or $6,000 to move. But if it's just making sure that your car doesn't get stolen, you could just get another car, because he's got a Kia, folks. And yeah, I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but they get stolen a lot. They've got some type of manufacturer defect or something.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes, and remember, one of the things that I did mention, or, you know, it was a concept that I think I was trying to get across. And I now that I think about it, I should have said it to him this way. But what I was trying to say really was just for him to consider the possibility of making a sacrifice in this situation. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes we're so focused on maintaining this picturesque vision, this fantasy, you know, and we've done so much to build this fantasy. And it's so hard, you know, to imagine, okay, well, now I have to part ways with a part of this, you know, and but sometimes the reward can be so much greater, you know what I mean? And sometimes that's what we don't see when we're so focused on whatever this thing that we want or this person we want, you know.
Yeah, so in that example, he was focused on living somewhere better, because he made it known that he was not very happy with the apartment in the first place.
Which is understandable.
And so I'm like, okay, but you signed that lease.
You signed the
You
lease.
knew what the apartment looked like, and you've only been there for what, 2 months?
Yeah.
So are you looking for an excuse to move, or like what is the real goal here? And it was like a light bulb went off, and we were both, sharing how our perspective on the situation. And he's like, okay, I see now. And we advised him to speak with his girlfriend and actually figure out what the goal was and how they could work backward from there. And honestly, that's what I encourage you to do as well. If you're listening to this podcast and you're trying to figure out how to navigate change, I really encourage you to think about, okay, well, if you're trying to figure out figure out how to navigate a change that is external and you don't want, well, you can figure out, well, what do I have control over in this situation? 1, and 2, what does this actually mean in my life? Because it could be a change that you don't like, but it could not really amount to very much practical changes in your day-to-day life when you think about it.
Right.
So really think about your long-term goals, because if that change that is external to you isn't going to affect your ability to meet your goals, then does it really matter in the grand scheme of things?
Right. And right. That's the hard part, I think, at times. And keeping up with the Joneses. Because I know that I had a tendency to want to fit in, you know what I mean? When I was younger. So
we all did.
Yeah, so that right there, you know what I mean? It takes a willingness also to explore different things, change. Especially when you're young, man, honestly, change things a lot. Like, do different things, take different hairstyles. I don't know, different tie your shoes different ways, just different things. I don't know, because like just try different things. And
well, honestly, at any age, you don't have to be young to try different things. At any age, you can wake up and decide, you know what, I want to have blue hair today, and you can have blue hair that day. And if you have a job where they're like, I don't want you to have blue hair, ask them why. Because, coming from an HR manager, they can't fire you for having blue hair unless it actually affects your job. So unless it actually affects your job, if they fire you, you've got a wrongful termination case on your hands.
Yeah, see, in this day and age, it's not like the old days. Where you ask a question like that, they can just tell you, you know what, if you don't like it, you can go ahead and kick rocks.
But if you are working from home, or even if you're not working from home, if you are not necessarily in an environment where you know that having blue hair would have an impact in any way, then have blue hair. I mean, I've gone into stores and the cashiers had blue hair, and I've given them a compliment just to let them know I love that you are personally expressing yourself regardless of what job you may hold, because you're you before you're an employee. And so whatever age you are, back to what we were saying, make that change. My mom dyes her hair different colors like every quarter of the year.
I feel like blue is like, is it kind of hard to dye your hair blue? Like, do you have to use a lot if you have dark hair?
Well, if you have dark hair, you have to dye your hair blonde first to get it to go blue.
Oh, wow.
That's why my mom's hair is blonde right now.
Oh, wow. Okay. I see. Wow. Little lesson in cosmetology.
Yes.
Everybody out there.
But, yeah, it's crazy how when you're going through the changes yourself, how even if you prepared for it, so like with the house, to go back to our original topic, we created a plan for what we wanted to change, how we wanted to actually go about these renovations, and the timeline. And it seemed like it was not going to be that hard. It was like, all right, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is our budget. Perfect. And now that we're in the middle of doing it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is an undertaking. And it just feels overwhelming. And not only because it's a lot of work, but because we're going through a lot of change at the same time.
Yeah. It's very... it's frustrating sometimes. I don't mean for it is just surprising, I guess, how no matter how many times in my life I experience the same thing, it still comes at me. I still don't see it coming somehow. Like, and I mean, even though, like, I guess now at this point I kind of do. I just expect for everything to be more expensive than I originally thought it was going to be.
I was waiting to see exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, because it's like you get this, you thinking like at first it seemed like we counted everything and it was like, yep, we're gonna do this, and all of a sudden it's like now if we're like, well, wait a second, you know what I mean? It seemed like everything was, and I mean it still is, you know what I'm saying? It's not like, we're not still in the position that we wanted to be in, but everything is more expensive than you originally.
Well, that's life, babe. That's life.
I mean the fees, and that's one of the things that that I'm talking about, like
trying to get him to roll with the changes of having to spend this money. It's gonna have to change to someone else's hands for us to be able to get what we want, baby.
Yeah, that's true. But man, I mean, everything is just so high.
Yeah,
prices are outrageous.
Yeah. But that's all right. We can manage it. We're just gonna have to make some changes. I mean, we don't need all these subscription services. We can balance some things out, but that's also something that I wanted to discuss. Is if there's a change that you need to make, but you've been putting it off, I encourage you to make it sooner than later. And there are so many examples that I can give, but I'm going to use our car. Our car has been just randomly turning off out of nowhere while we're driving it. And we knew we needed to replace it, but we're like, you know what? It should be fine until next year.
Right.
But this time it happened like in the middle of us driving. Usually it happens when we're just putting it into gear.
Right.
And so now it's like, oh, shoot. Okay, if we put this change off any longer, it could cost us more money, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And so definitely, if you know you need to make a change, don't put it off any longer, because it will cost you more in the end, whether it's more money, more time, or more effort.
Right. Well, with that being said, I mean, yeah, that's the challenge. Obviously, timing is such a major factor in a person's success. It can really be the difference, because just like you said, I mean, as soon as you feel like you got everything squared away, that's when something goes a problem. You have a car problem, or
but see, that also could just be you manifesting that in your like subconscious way of like, well, everything's going too great, so something got to go wrong. Let me just go ahead and let it be the car. And so that's also, we working on these problems. If you haven't read The Big Leap, definitely recommend it. We're working on these upper limit problems over here.
Yeah. Okay. But there could be some element to that, That's kind of a mystical type of way of looking at it.
It's not mysticism. It was written by someone who has studied psychology.
Well, if you are always looking for something to go wrong, something eventually will go wrong.
Exactly.
And then, that's another one of the challenges that I feel that comes along with experience is, you learn from your mistakes, right? You learn from poor decisions in the past. And after you learn from all of these things, well, now,
Hopefully you make different decisions.
You're gonna want to make different decisions, But I feel that we tend to, as people, more or less err to extremes before we manage to find a happy medium. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, you've got to know what cold feels like, and you got to know what hot feels like to find your perfect warm.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, well, what are you gonna do if you don't go from extreme to extreme? And that's why it really is a journey of changes and choices.
So should everybody at least at one point try extreme like BDSM?
Okay, wait a minute now.
Well, I mean, if you don't try it.
What I was talking about. I was talking about everyone's got to hit rock bottom at some point, and everyone's got to get hit their highest high at some point in their life. You talking about a completely... We gonna have another talk.
I'm just saying. I mean, you can't knock it, you know what I mean, without trying it, right?
I can knock it and not try it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even saying I'm into that or nothing like that. I just was
like, it's a whole bunch of like that in like for what you're talking about. It's a whole bunch of things in that kink space that I can be like, you know what? That's for you.
Well, you gotta try.
Not trying to kink shame you. No. But not for me. I don't need to try to know it's not for me.
Try a little bit of everything.
No. See, that's what you were supposed to do before you got married. Because now you got me.
Oh, well, yeah. No. I'm not saying, no, wait a second. No, I'm not suggesting anything. This is more of a question for our listeners to think about,
Well, honestly, that leads me to a good segue to possibly a next conversation. You should be having these conversations. If you have a partner, whether you're in a relationship or you're just having sex with them, you should be comfortable having these conversations. Or you should be comfortable making a change in partners if they don't want to talk about it.
Oh, yeah, about sex?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. You got to, yeah. Yes, that's a topic for another episode, perhaps our next episode.
Well, all right. If you all have any questions about how to navigate the changes in your life, or if you would like to give some feedback about our discussion or anything that you would like us to talk about on our podcast, please reach out to us at gothinkaboutit.pod@gmail.com. I will not spell it again because I messed up last time.
Yes, it's go think about it pod@gmail.com. Yeah.
Yes. But other than that, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And thank you for listening.